My parents skipped my wedding for my sister's party, and that was just the beginning of the betrayal. You won't believe what my parents did. They skipped my wedding to attend my sister's housewarming party, and that was just the beginning. I don't even know where to begin, honestly. I guess the headline says it all. My parents went to my sister's housewarming party instead of my wedding. Yep, my wedding. The most important day of my life. And not only did they skip it, they chose to skip it, all because I refused to invite my sister. And I had good reason, trust me. But let me back up. Growing up, my sister and I had what you'd call a complicated relationship. Think Mean Girls. But she was blood-related and had access to every embarrassing secret about me from birth. Let's call her Melissa, because that's fitting, sounds sweet. But if you bite too deep, you get poison. She's 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she's been the golden child. Straight A's, cheer captain, got into some fancy East Coast college, came back with a degree in communications and a knack for twisting any story to make herself look like a saint and me like a jealous wreck. Our parents? Oh, they ate it up. My mom used to say, Melissa's just more mature, whenever she insulted me in front of company. My dad used to laugh when she joked about me being the family disappointment. You'd think it was some sitcom-level sibling rivalry, but no, this stuff left scars. I learned early on that if Melissa said something and I said the opposite, they believed her without question. So when I met my now wife, Emily, it felt like stepping into a world where I actually mattered. Someone who listened. Someone who chose me. She's calm where I'm anxious, patient where I'm reactive. Honestly, she's the only reason I believed I could even have a stable relationship, let alone build a future with someone. We'd been dating for 4 years before I popped the question. And when we started planning the wedding, I knew one thing for certain. Melissa wasn't going to be there. Now before anyone says, but it's family, let me tell you what happened the last time I saw her. Melissa came to our engagement dinner uninvited. I don't even know how she found out. We only told close friends and immediate family, and I specifically left her off the list. But she showed up anyway, in this blinding red dress like she was the main attraction, not us. During the toast, she stood up and said, loudly, that she was surprised I managed to get someone like Emily. I always thought you'd end up alone or maybe with a gamer girl who lived in her mom's basement. No offense. She laughed, like it was funny. Emily was mortified. I was livid. We pulled her aside afterward, and she claimed it was a joke, said we were too sensitive, and that it was just banter like we always had. I told her right then and there, she was no longer welcome at any event in my life until she could apologize genuinely. Spoiler alert, the apology never came. In fact, she doubled down and told my mom I was gatekeeping happiness. The final straw came when my mom called me a month before the wedding and begged, really, if I'd just invite Melissa to keep the peace. When I said no, she got cold, like frostbite cold. She said something like, well, we'll have to make some tough decisions then. I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. 3 days before my wedding, I got a text from my mom. Not a call. A text. It said, we've decided to attend Melissa's housewarming instead. It's unfortunate, but we can't condone division in the family. Hope the wedding goes well. I stared at that message for 20 minutes. Emily was in the kitchen with our caterer, going over the table settings, laughing about how one of the name cards had been printed with Bavid instead of David. It was this soft, warm moment, and here I was, numb. My parents, my own flesh and blood, ditching my wedding for a party with a cheese board and throw pillows. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was confirmation of what I'd always feared. I was never going to be enough for them, not next to Melissa. But that was just the beginning. After the text from my mom, I didn't say anything for a while. I just kind of sat with it. You ever have one of those moments where you feel your whole childhood snapping into focus like a cracked windshield finally shattering? That's what it felt like. Emily saw my face and came over, immediately concerned. I handed her the phone without saying a word. She read it once, blinked, then read it again like maybe she'd misunderstood. Then she just whispered, oh babe. We went through the motions the next few days. Final fittings, last-minute RSVPs, seating charts, but my heart wasn't really in it anymore. I smiled for Emily, I smiled for our friends, but something inside me felt hollow. The night before the wedding, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. She told me she wasn't coming either. It's just not right to exclude Melissa like this, she said, as if Melissa hadn't excluded me from basic human decency for the past 20 years. I didn't yell. I just said, thanks for letting me know, and hung up. But here's where it gets even worse. You know how I said Melissa lies a lot? That's her favorite sport. Like, she should get a trophy for it. Apparently, she told my parents and my aunt that Emily was the reason she wasn't invited. Not me. Emily. She told them that Emily didn't like her, that Emily was jealous and controlling, and had forbidden me from having a relationship with my family, that I was being manipulated. You can probably guess who they believed. So now, not only were they ditching my wedding, they were treating my fiancé like some evil temptress who was pulling me away from my roots. Never mind that Emily had bent over backward trying to be nice to them. Never mind that she offered to let bygones be bygones more than once. None of that mattered. Melissa had spun her web, and they were happily tangled in it. I was beyond angry at that point, but it wasn't loud, dramatic anger. It was cold, heavy, like a weight in my chest I couldn't breathe around. I didn't sleep that night, but I still got up the next morning, put on my suit, and stood at the altar with the woman I loved. I'll say this, the wedding, in spite of everything, was beautiful, small, intimate, full of laughter and real support. Emily's parents flew in early and were absolute angels. My two best friends gave heartfelt toasts. Even my college roommate, who I hadn't seen in years, showed up with his husband and brought everyone to tears with a surprise performance of our favorite song from when we were broke and living off ramen. But that empty row where my family was supposed to sit? I couldn't stop seeing it. Emily squeezed my hand during the ceremony and whispered, "We've got all we need right here." I nodded. I smiled. But it felt like trying to patch a leak with paper towels. We didn't talk about it much that day. We danced. We drank. We kissed under fairy lights and tried to pretend none of it had happened. But the next morning, when I checked my phone, there it was. A photo, posted by Melissa on Instagram. A picture of my parents, smiling like they'd just won the lottery, standing in front of her stupid, "Welcome to our new nest" balloon arch. My mom had the audacity to tag it, celebrating real love and new beginnings. I swear I could have thrown my phone across the room. But what came next? That was the real punch to the gut. So there I was, staring at that smug Instagram photo, my parents, arms wrapped around Melissa like they'd just survived a hurricane together and rebuilt civilization in her living room. My mom's caption was the cherry on top, surrounded by love, not drama. I almost laughed. Almost. I should have ignored it. Should have just powered through the honeymoon phase with Emily and left it alone. But of course, I couldn't. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring and sounded way too chipper. "Hi, honey. How was the wedding?" I was quiet for a second. Then I said, "You tell me." The silence on the other end was thick. She sighed and did this dramatic pause, like she was so exhausted from being the victim in all of this. "You left us no choice. We begged you to include Melissa. Family is forever. Unless it's me, right?" I snapped. "Then it's conditional. Convenient." She got defensive fast. "Don't be childish. You made things awkward by excluding your own sister. You expected us to just pretend that didn't matter." And that was when it hit me. They didn't come because I didn't invite Melissa. Not because of a scheduling conflict or an emergency. No, they chose her. Again. I asked her, point blank, "Do you even care how that made me feel?" She scoffed. Scoffed. "You're being emotional. You've always been sensitive." That word, sensitive, has followed me my entire life like a ghost. My parents used it as a muzzle any time I had feelings that didn't align with their image of the perfect family. Melissa could scream, lie, destroy, and they'd say she was passionate. I'd cry or get upset. Too sensitive. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. But the damage was done. My wedding day now had an aftertaste of ashes. Emily found me sitting on the balcony of our honeymoon suite with a whiskey I didn't even remember pouring. She didn't say anything at first. Just wrapped her arms around me from behind and rested her chin on my shoulder. "They really didn't come," I whispered. "I know," she said softly. "But I did." That line hit me right in the ribs. I turned to face her. Her eyes were gentle but fierce, like she was trying to hold my pain for me. And in that moment, I realized something that both hurt and healed at the same time. She was my family now. Not Melissa. Not my parents. Not the people who only showed up for me when it was easy. Emily was the one who stayed. We ended up extending our honeymoon. We went hiking in the mountains, drank wine by fireplaces, tried local food until we were stuffed and sleepy. For the first time in forever, I felt safe. And yet, that nagging ache never fully left. Because no matter how much you try to outrun it, there's something devastating about realizing the people who raised you don't really see you. And just when I thought the dust had settled, when I was finally ready to let it go and move forward, Melissa called me. Out of nowhere. No warning. No apology. Just called me like we were still play-acting as siblings in our parents-curated fantasy land. "You're being dramatic," she said the second I answered. "You ruined everything because you can't take a joke." I blinked. "Excuse me." I didn't mean to upset you at the engagement dinner. God, I was trying to be funny. It's not my fault your fiancé is so uptight. That's when I lost it. I told her exactly what I thought about her manipulations, the lies she fed our parents, the years of undermining and bullying she cloaked in jokes. I told her I wasn't playing along anymore, and that from now on, she wasn't part of my life. She called me ungrateful, said I was breaking the family apart. And then, before hanging up, she said something I still think about. You'll come back. You always do. She was wrong. But part of me still wonders if she wants me to come back, or just wants to keep winning. After that phone call with Melissa, I promised myself I was done. Done trying to make peace with people who saw me as a problem. Done explaining myself to people who never listened. I thought that was it, that I'd said my piece, and now Emily and I could focus on building something real, just the two of us. But of course, nothing's ever that clean. We got back home from our honeymoon, and the first couple of days were blissful. I avoided social media, didn't return calls. I put my focus entirely on Emily and our little life. But then she got a message from an old friend of mine, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, but who still kept loose ties to my family. The message was short but loaded. Hey, just wanted to say sorry for everything that's being said about you too. You don't deserve that. Hope you're holding up. Emily showed it to me and asked, what is he talking about? My stomach dropped. I hadn't even considered that Melissa would still be running her mouth. But apparently, while we were sipping cocktails and pretending the world didn't exist, my sister had been spinning her usual tales. Only this time, she'd leveled up. Emily's name had been dragged through the mud. Hard. Melissa told anyone who would listen that Emily alienated me from my family, that she was controlling and didn't want to share me with anyone. She claimed Emily banned my mom from being involved in the wedding planning and told people that Emily was the reason I'd cut everyone off. She even told one of our cousins that Emily was just with me for money, which was hilarious considering I'm a middle-class IT guy with a 12-year-old Honda and a fear of credit card debt. I was livid. But Emily? She was quiet. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding her phone, blinking slowly like she'd been slapped, and didn't know what to do with the sting. I could see her trying to brush it off, trying to be the calm one like always. But her voice cracked when she said, I thought they just didn't like me. But this is personal. It broke me. I tried so hard to shield her from that side of my family. I didn't want her to feel what I felt growing up, that sense of never being wanted unless you were useful. And now, here it was, poisoning our life, our fresh start. That night, we sat on the couch in the dark, just holding each other. Emily whispered, they were supposed to be your people. I didn't answer because I didn't know what to say. They were supposed to be. The next morning, I called my cousin, the one Melissa had talked to about Emily. I asked him what he'd heard, and he confirmed everything. Said Melissa had been on a roll the whole time we were gone, venting to family, twisting things, acting like she was the victim in some war Emily supposedly started. Apparently, even our grandmother, who rarely gets involved in drama, said something like, that girl's no good for him. I couldn't believe it. My grandmother. The same woman who used to bake me cookies and sneak me $5 bills when my parents forgot I existed. So, I did something I hadn't planned to do. I called my dad. Not because I thought he'd suddenly take my side, but because I needed to know if any of them even bothered to question the narrative. He answered after a few rings, sounding tired. I told him everything. About the rumors, about how Emily was being blamed for everything, about how I was sick of the lies. You know what he said? Well, you did make it all pretty dramatic by not inviting your sister. No defense. No concern. No shock that his other daughter had lied and gossiped about my wife. Just blame. I told him I was done. That until Melissa apologized and they made things right with Emily, they were no longer part of my life or our future. No birthdays. No holidays. No visits if we ever have kids. He didn't try to stop me. Just said, if that's how you feel, son, then I guess that's your decision. I hung up, and that was the moment I truly realized I didn't lose them at the wedding. I never had them to begin with. It was a couple of days after that phone call with my dad. I'd been walking around like a zombie, not angry, not crying, just numb. I was still going to work, still making dinner, still laughing at dumb YouTube videos with Emily at night, but it was all autopilot, and Emily noticed. One evening, we were folding laundry, mundane, simple, quiet, and she said, "You're not really here." I looked up, confused. "What do you mean? I'm literally folding your yoga pants right now." She gave a small laugh, but there was no smile behind it. That's not what I meant. She sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at me, not angry, not disappointed, just clear, like she was seeing right through me. You keep saying you're done with them, she said. But I don't think you really are. That hit me harder than anything Melissa had said. I started to protest, but she gently shook her head. I don't mean you're calling them behind my back or anything. I mean emotionally. You still need them to be who you wish they were. You're grieving the version of them you never actually had. And damn, she was right. I'd been sitting in this fog of betrayal, hoping on some subconscious, pathetic level that my parents would come to their senses. That they'd show up at our door and apologize. That my mom would cry and say she missed me. That my dad would admit he was wrong. But they weren't coming. And Emily knew that. I think I did too. I just didn't want to believe it. I know it hurts, she continued. But you're not going to heal if you keep waiting for people who never chose you in the first place. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat there, laundry forgotten, feeling like someone had cracked my chest open. I don't want to be your rebound family, she added softly. That snapped me out of it. What? You're not. I don't see you like that. I know you love me, she said quickly. I do. But I need to know you're building something with me, not using me to fill a hole they left behind. I felt like the worst person in the world, because in that moment, I realized she wasn't accusing me. She was asking me to let go. For real. And the truth was, I hadn't. I still had this little flicker of hope burning in the back of my brain that my parents would eventually realize what they'd done. That Melissa would wake up and feel remorse. That all the years of being second best would be washed away with one heartfelt conversation and a family hug on the porch. But no, that's not how people like them work. That's not how healing works. That night, we sat down and wrote new boundaries. Together. We agreed we wouldn't invite my parents or Melissa to any future events. We removed them from our social media. I even blocked them from seeing any future posts. Emily asked if I wanted to send them a letter explaining why. I thought about it. But no. I'd spent too much of my life writing speeches in my head that they were never going to hear. This time, silence was going to be my closure. We opened a bottle of wine, toasted to our tiny apartment and our weird little dog, and watched a movie on the couch. And for the first time in weeks, I slept like a rock. But of course, peace doesn't last long when you've got a sister like Melissa. Because just when I thought we were moving forward, she showed up. And if you think that was the worst part, just wait until you hear who showed up at my door, completely uninvited. It was a Sunday afternoon. Cloudy, quiet. One of those perfect lazy days where you don't even bother changing out of pajama pants. Emily was baking something that made the whole apartment smell like vanilla and cinnamon, and I was halfway through a video game I hadn't had time to touch in weeks. Then someone knocked on the door. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor, someone looking for a lost package or needing help jump-starting their car. I paused the game and went to check the peephole, and there she was. Melissa. My heart stopped. She looked like she hadn't slept, hair pulled into a messy bun, oversized sunglasses, holding a latte like it was the only thing keeping her alive. She was fidgeting, glancing around like she wasn't even sure why she was there. Emily came up behind me and froze. Nope, she said immediately. We're not doing this. I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt like someone had dropped a bucket of ice water on my back. I hadn't seen Melissa in person since the engagement dinner, and now she was just there. On our doorstep like she'd forgotten to return a library book. She's probably here to start more crap, Emily muttered, turning back toward the kitchen. Don't give her the chance. But I opened the door anyway, not wide, just enough to look her in the eye. She pulled off her sunglasses and said, "Hey," like it was any normal day. I didn't answer. "I was just in the neighborhood," she said. "Thought maybe we could talk." I actually laughed. "You were just in the neighborhood?" She shrugged. "I know things got messy. I figured you might be ready to let that go." Let that go. As if she hadn't lied about my wife. As if she hadn't orchestrated my parents ditching my wedding. As if I was the one who needed to get over it. "You're unbelievable," I said, voice low. "I came here to make peace," she snapped. "But if you're going to be hostile..." "No," I cut in. "Don't twist this. You came here to feel better about yourself. You don't want peace. You want absolution. And I'm not giving it to you." That's when she dropped the mask. Her jaw clenched. "You think you're better than us now, huh? Just because you married some boring, perfect little wifey and play house in the shoebox apartment." I took a step back. Not from fear, just revulsion. "You made your choice," I said. "And I made mine. Now leave." She laughed bitterly. "Don't come crawling back when she leaves you." That was the last straw. Emily came back into the room, holding her phone. "Already calling security," she said calmly. "I'd give you about 30 seconds before this gets real awkward." Melissa blinked, suddenly realizing she didn't have control here. She muttered something under her breath and stormed off down the hall. We didn't speak for a few minutes after that. I closed the door, locked it, leaned against it, and just stood there. Emily finally said, "You okay?" "I don't know," I replied, "but I'm not surprised." That night, I sat down and wrote something I never thought I'd write, a goodbye letter. Not to send, just to process. A letter to my parents, to Melissa, to the version of family I'd been clinging to since I was old enough to know what that word was supposed to mean. It wasn't poetic or emotional. It was simple, just the truth, written out plainly. You chose her, every single time, and now I choose me. I never showed it to anyone. But the act of writing it felt like ripping off a scab and finally letting the wound breathe. It had been a few days since Melissa showed up at our door like a villain trying to force her way into a redemption arc. Emily and I were still processing it, in that quiet way where you don't talk about it out loud, but it lingers in everything. Like a bad smell that clings to your clothes even after you've washed them. I'd stopped checking social media altogether. I didn't want to see more fake smiles, family selfies, or whatever narrative my parents were now running with. We were back to normal life, sort of. I was working. Emily was teaching her yoga classes again, and we were both trying to reclaim our peace. Then I got a Facebook message from my cousin Jake. Now, Jake's always been that weird outlier in our family, the kind of guy who shows up late to Christmas with thrift store gifts but always makes you laugh so hard your stomach hurts. We were close as kids but had drifted. He'd moved across the country years ago and didn't really keep up with the family drama. He wasn't the type to randomly reach out, so when I saw his name, I hesitated. I opened it. "Hey man, not sure if you even want to hear from me, but I just got back from visiting your folks. Figured you should know what's being said." And just like that, I felt my stomach sink. Again, Jake went on to tell me that during his visit, he'd overheard my mom on the phone telling someone, probably her sister, that I was brainwashed, that Emily isolated me, and that I was probably depressed and taking it out on my family. That Melissa had tried to make peace, but I blew up on her for no reason. They were rewriting history in time. Jake said he didn't push back too hard, didn't want to start a fight, but he made it clear he didn't buy it. That's when my dad said something that actually made Jake uncomfortable enough to leave early. "Well, at least we have Melissa. 1 out of 2 ain't bad." I stared at that line for a long time. 1 out of 2. Like I was a failed experiment. A bad investment. Jake finished the message with this: "I know we haven't talked much lately, but if you ever need someone in your corner, I'm here." I don't believe their version of things. I never did. I sat there in silence for a long time after that. It wasn't that I was surprised by what my parents said. It was that they said it so casually, like it was settled, like they'd already filed me away in a drawer labeled "Lost Cause." Emily came home to find me still at the kitchen table. The screen dimmed, but the message burned into my brain. She took one look at me and said, "What happened now?" I handed her the phone. She read it all, and then, for the first time in all of this, she got angry. Not teary, not quiet, not calm, furious. "I'm sorry, but how dare they," she said, voice shaking. "You spent your entire life trying to earn their love, and now they're just sitting there gossiping like you're some stranger who wronged them?" I didn't even respond, because I knew if I did, I'd cry, and I didn't want to cry anymore. I was tired of bleeding over people who never even acknowledged the wounds. That night, Emily held me close while we lay in bed and whispered, "We're gonna start our own legacy, one without them, one that feels like home." And maybe that's what hurt the most, realizing I never really had that before. But I was going to build it, even if it broke me first. Work was the one place untouched by all the chaos. My coworkers didn't know about the drama. No one tiptoed around me, and that made it feel like the safest place in my life. I'd throw myself into projects, skip lunch half the time, and stay late just so I didn't have to go home and think about the family-shaped crater lingering in my chest. About 2 weeks after Melissa's ambush visit, I got an email from my manager asking if I'd be interested in representing the company at a regional tech summit in Chicago. It was a 3-day thing: presentations, networking, a few panels. I'd never been sent on anything like that before. I wasn't even the most senior person on the team. Apparently, one of the VPs had been watching my work and liked the way I handled a tricky project earlier that quarter. It was the first time in months I'd felt noticed, not tolerated. Not tolerated in silence. Seen. I told Emily that night. She was thrilled. She insisted I go, booked my flights and hotel like she was planning a vacation. But what stuck with me most was how happy she looked when she said, "You deserve this." Not just the trip, the recognition. I didn't want to admit how foreign that feeling was, being celebrated without strings. When I landed in Chicago, something shifted. I'd never traveled alone before, not since high school. For the first time, I felt what it was like to walk around a city with no one expecting anything from me. No family guilt in the air. No invisible leash tugging me back to a version of myself that never quite fit. The conference was great. My presentation went over better than I expected, and I made connections that felt genuine. But the real surprise came on the last night. There was a cocktail mixer for attendees. Casual but classy. I ended up chatting with one of the panel speakers, an older guy named Martin who reminded me of what a real dad should feel like. Wise, warm, no condescension in sight. We talked shop for a bit, then somehow drifted into life stuff. Marriage. Family. I gave a vague answer about being newly married, skipped over the rest. But Martin? He looked at me with this knowing smile and said, "Sometimes, blood relatives are just proof biology works. Family's what you build when you stop apologizing for your boundaries." He didn't say it like he was guessing. He said it like a man who had lived it. It hit me like a freight train. Because he was right. I'd been raised to believe that blood demanded loyalty, that forgiveness was mandatory, that family trumped self-respect. But standing there, in a city hundreds of miles from my hometown and the people who made me feel small for most of my life, I realized something. My parents had stopped being my family long before they skipped my wedding. They just made it official that day. When I got back home, Emily had cleaned the whole apartment, baked my favorite muffins, and left a little note by the door that said, "We missed you, but we're so proud of you." And that was it. That was the turning point. Not Melissa. Not my parents. That coming home to a woman who chose me every day, with no guilt, no games, no manipulation, that's what snapped me out of the spiral. But just as I began settling into that clarity, something else happened. I got an email from my childhood neighbor, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. She said, "I thought you should see this." I wasn't sure if I should get involved, but it felt wrong not to. Attached was a photo. My mother, my father, Melissa, all three of them, sitting at a family-style dinner with a caption that read, "Celebrating what truly matters, truth, loyalty, and forgiveness." Some people never learn the difference. It had been posted on Melissa's business account. She's a lifestyle influencer now, if you can believe that. Over 40,000 followers. A curated feed of candles, self-care, and the ugliest fake wisdom you've ever read. But there it was. A direct shot across the bow. They were using me as the villain in their narrative. Publicly. Quietly. Deliberately. And just like that, I stopped caring about keeping the peace. Seeing that photo lit a fuse I didn't even know I still had left. It wasn't even the picture itself. It was the smugness, the way they weaponized forgiveness to paint themselves as the victims. Melissa posing like she was some spiritual guru who'd risen above petty grievances, while I was the dirty little secret they could all pat themselves on the back for surviving. I sat there for a while, seething. Not just for me, but for Emily too. For everything they'd dragged her into. For every lie they'd whispered behind our backs. For every seat they left empty at the wedding they were supposed to show up for. I realized something brutal but honest. I didn't want to make things right anymore. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want closure. I wanted distance. Total, irrevocable, public distance. So I did something I never thought I'd have the guts to do. I wrote a letter. But not to them, to everyone. I posted it on my own social media account. No cryptic quotes. No passive-aggressive digs. Just the truth. I wrote about what had happened, the choice they made to skip my wedding, the lies they spread about Emily, the way they publicly weaponized forgiveness against us like we were the ones who'd wronged them. I didn't name names. I didn't call out details to start drama. I simply stated the facts. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up for you. It's who chooses you, even when it's inconvenient. I'm grateful for the family I'm building with my wife. The rest? I wish them healing, but they are no longer my burden to carry. If you're here for that journey, I welcome you. If not, I release you without anger. Simple. Direct. No yelling. No theatrics. I posted it. Turned off comments. Sat back. The fallout was immediate. I got messages, so many messages. Some from old friends who said they'd always wondered why I seemed like the outsider at family events. A few from extended family members who quietly admitted they weren't surprised at all. Some unfollowed me, some didn't. But I didn't care either way. For the first time, the truth wasn't locked away in private fights and unanswered texts. It was out there. Visible. Irrefutable. Melissa, of course, tried to clap back. She posted some long-winded caption about how some people just can't handle accountability and how she was sending love to the lost and bitter. It was about as subtle as a brick through a window. But here's the beautiful part. Nobody cared. Nobody important, anyway. Her followers, strangers who liked her coffee bar setups and fake cozy vibes, cheered her on. But the people who mattered? The ones who really knew me? They stayed silent. And that was its own kind of justice. No one bought her act anymore. Even my cousin Jake messaged me. Finally. Good for you, man. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice after a lifetime of letting them narrate my story for me. That night, Emily made spaghetti. We ate on the couch, our dog curled up between us, watching some dumb reality show we both secretly loved. I laughed harder than I had in months. Not because everything was fixed, not because the sadness was gone, but because the sadness didn't own me anymore. I wasn't the family scapegoat. I wasn't the problem child. I wasn't the villain in their fairy tale. I was just a guy who finally realized it's okay to stop setting yourself on fire to keep people warm. And damn, it felt good. I should have known Melissa wouldn't go down without a final, messy performance. People like her don't just lose quietly. They need a stage, an audience. And if they can't have loyalty, they'll settle for attention. It started with small things. Anonymous numbers texting me, family first, and you're breaking your mother's heart. Weird Facebook friend requests from accounts that were clearly made 5 minutes ago. Comments left on Emily's old photos, passive-aggressively asking if she was proud of stealing a son from his real family. At first, I ignored it, blocked, deleted, moved on. But then Melissa decided to up the ante. She sent a letter, not an email, not a text, a physical, handwritten letter mailed to our apartment, like it was 1952 and she was starring in her own tragic Lifetime movie. It was 3 pages of unfiltered manipulation. She wrote about how she missed her brother, how family wounds run deep, but could always be healed. She said she knew Emily had convinced me to hate them. She even had the audacity to say she forgave me for lashing out and misunderstanding her heart. She signed it, "Love always, your only real sister," as if I had a backup set of siblings hidden somewhere. I handed the letter to Emily without a word. She read it once, snorted, and tossed it into the recycling bin without hesitation. No ceremony, no discussion. And that was the moment I realized something simple but powerful. Melissa was begging, not for forgiveness, not for a real relationship. She was begging for the control she lost. People like her survive on 2 things, attention and power. The moment you take both away, they thrash like fish on dry land, desperate to pull you back into the mess where they feel strong and you feel weak. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't call her. I didn't post about it online. I gave her nothing. And in doing so, I took everything back. Weeks passed, and the text slowed. The fake accounts stopped. Even Melissa's vague, whiny posts dried up. Without a target to attack, without someone reacting, she shriveled. She needed the narrative to feel important. Without it, she was just another angry woman screaming into a void. Meanwhile, my life got quieter. Better. Emily and I started focusing on the things we actually wanted to build. We found a house small, a little rough around the edges, but ours. A place with creaky floors and peeling paint and a backyard just big enough for our dog to run wild. We didn't do a big announcement or make it a spectacle. Just signed the papers, grabbed takeout, and ate burgers on the floor of the empty living room, grinning like idiots. We weren't running from anything anymore. We were building towards something. That difference? It changed everything. The guilt faded. The sadness dulled. The anger went cold. And the part of me that once would have crumbled at the sight of a family photo without my face in it, that part didn't even flinch anymore. Emily and I weren't planning on throwing a housewarming party. We were still living out of boxes, using a foldable card table as a dining room set. And there were paint swatches taped up all over the living room walls because we couldn't agree on a shade of blue. It was chaos, but it was our chaos. It was Jake, my cousin, who convinced me. "You're already building something better than what you came from," he said when he called to check in. "Why not celebrate that?" So we did. It wasn't fancy. Just a casual Saturday afternoon thing. Friends, a few coworkers, some of Emily's family who'd basically adopted me at this point. We grilled burgers in the backyard, drank cheap beer out of mismatched cups, and laughed until our sides hurt. There were no speeches, no tense, careful conversations, no walking on eggshells wondering which version of someone would show up. It felt like breathing after holding it for years. At one point, I stepped back from the crowd, just stood by the kitchen window, watching everyone. Emily's dad was teaching one of my coworkers how to flip burgers without burning them. Emily's mom was setting up a makeshift dessert table on the patio. Jake was trying and failing to set up a hammock he'd bought us as a housewarming gift. Our dog was running circles around everyone, living his best life. It was messy and loud and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. And that's when it hit me. This was family. Not the people who shared my last name. Not the ones who showed up only when they needed to be worshipped. Family was laughter you didn't have to earn. Support you didn't have to beg for. Safety that didn't come with a list of conditions. I was still standing there, soaking it all in, when Jake wandered over with 2 beers. We leaned against the fence, sipping in comfortable silence for a while. Then, casually, like he was mentioning the weather, he said, "You know your mom called me last week, right?" My heart skipped. I hadn't heard anything from them in months. Not a word. Not an apology. Not even a petty message trying to drag me back into their orbit. Jake shrugged. "She asked if I thought you'd calmed down yet. Said they were thinking about reaching out now that things had cooled off." I barked a laugh before I could stop myself. He clinked his bottle against mine. "Told her she was out of her damn mind if she thought you were still sitting around waiting for her to grace you with forgiveness." I didn't say anything right away. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't angry at them. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. Jake grinned at me like he could read my mind. "Proud of you, man. Seriously." That night, after everyone left and the house was quiet again, I found myself standing in the doorway of our empty guest room. It used to hurt thinking about who should have been there. The parents who should have come to the wedding. The sister who should have had my back. But now, I thought about the future. A real family. A real legacy. Built from scratch if it had to be. Maybe it would just be Emily and me for a while. Maybe someday it would be kids, or more dogs, or foster kids, or friends crashing on the couch because they had nowhere else to go. Whatever shape it took, it would be ours. Not a legacy of guilt or fake forgiveness. A legacy of love, of choice, of finally choosing ourselves. About 2 weeks after the housewarming party, something strange showed up in the mailbox. It was a plain, heavy envelope. No return address. Handwritten, with just my name. I stared at it for a while on the kitchen counter. Emily noticed. She didn't say anything, just watched me with that same look she had when Melissa showed up months ago, part protective, part ready to go full mama bear if needed. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a wedding card. Not just any card, the card my parents had apparently intended to give me, back when they were still pretending they might show up. It was ivory, embossed with doves, like something picked hastily from a grocery store rack 5 minutes before checkout. There was no real message inside. Just one line in my father's handwriting. "We hope you find happiness in the choices you've made." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of the hurt. No ownership. Just one last dig disguised as well-wishing. One last way to say, "You did this to yourself." I stood there, holding that flimsy piece of cardstock, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel rage, or sadness, or guilt. I felt pity. Not for me. For them. Because here they were, still trying to play the long game, still trying to maintain control, still clinging to the idea that I'd someday regret choosing a life that didn't revolve around their approval. Meanwhile, here I was, standing in a kitchen with a woman who loved me without condition, a mortgage with my name on it, a dog stealing bites of dinner off the counter, and a future that no longer had a seat reserved for ghosts. I slid the card back into the envelope and dropped it into the recycling bin without a second thought. Emily, standing across from me, gave a small smile and went back to stirring the pasta sauce she was making. No drama. No conversations that needed to be had. It was over. For real this time. That night, we sat out back on the patio under the string lights Jake had helped me hang during the party. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The air was cool, the stars were out, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the past wasn't banging on the door demanding to be let back in. I finally understood what healing felt like, not loud or triumphant, but quiet, soft, the slow, steady certainty that the worst was behind you and the best was something you got to build by choice, not chance. It was the kind of peace I used to think belonged to other people, stronger people, luckier people. Turns out, it belonged to anyone brave enough to stop chasing after those who were happiest when you were hurting, including me. With the mess behind us, it felt like we could finally breathe. But something strange happens when you clear out the noise. You start hearing your own voice again. And mine was louder than I expected. One night, a few weeks after tossing the card in the trash, Emily and I were sitting in the backyard again, sipping cheap wine and tossing a tennis ball for the dog. It was one of those lazy evenings where nothing urgent needed to be done. No lists. No expectations. I remember turning to her and saying, without really planning it, "Maybe it's time." She tilted her head, smiling. "Time for what?" And without a second of hesitation, I said, "To grow our family." It was something we had talked about, of course. Quietly, carefully. We knew we wanted kids someday, but after the disaster with my parents and Melissa, the idea had felt too heavy, too tangled in fear. I worried about bringing a child into a world where family could be a loaded, painful word. But sitting there with her, after everything we'd survived, I realized we weren't inheriting their patterns. We were writing our own. Emily's eyes lit up in a way I'll never forget. She put her wine glass down carefully, looked at me for a long moment, and said, "Let's do it." We didn't make a big announcement. We didn't throw ourselves into Instagram-worthy journeys or Pinterest boards. We just started living with the quiet, steady intention of building something bigger than ourselves. It felt powerful in a way nothing else ever had. Over the next few weeks, our life shifted in small but meaningful ways. Emily started researching doctors and prenatal vitamins with that fierce, focused energy she always had when she cared about something. I started putting extra hours at work into savings accounts labeled Future. We bought a second-hand crib we didn't need yet and stored it in the garage. It was old, a little scratched, but solid, kind of like us. There was a sense of joy humming through everything we did, a happiness that didn't need validation from anyone. And more than anything, it felt safe. One night, while we were repainting the guest room, a dusty, soft green Emily loved, I had a moment where I had to stop and just breathe it in. The laughter, the mess, the sweat dripping down my back, the future taking shape, one brushstroke at a time. I thought about the empty chairs at my wedding, the texts, the cruel Instagram posts, the letter full of fake forgiveness. And I realized something crystal clear. If losing them was the price of building this life, this messy, joyful, unfiltered life, I would pay it 1,000 times over. No regrets, no guilt, just gratitude that I finally learned the difference between the people you're born to and the people you choose. It happened on a random Tuesday. Emily and I had just finished putting together a second-hand dresser for the nursery, one of those nights where everything took twice as long because we couldn't stop laughing at how terrible we both were with Allen wrenches. The dog was asleep in a pile of bubble wrap, and we were sitting on the floor, sweaty and exhausted, eating leftover pizza straight out of the box. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. At first, I ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me, and when the voicemail popped up, I listened. It was my mom. Her voice was soft, almost unrecognizable, like she was trying to slip under the defenses she knew she'd helped build. She talked about missing her son, about how life's too short to hold grudges. She said she hoped we could find a way back to each other, that family is all that matters at the end. And for the first time, instead of feeling that old familiar ache, that dangerous pull toward guilt and self-doubt, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a clean, hard clarity. I didn't save the voicemail. I didn't call her back. I deleted it without hesitation. Because here's the thing, it wasn't a real apology. It wasn't about owning what they did. It was about them wanting access to the parts of my life they forfeited, the parts one fought like hell to protect. Maybe it was the sight of Emily sitting across from me, legs tangled up under her, baby books spread out like treasure maps. Maybe it was the way our half-finished nursery smelled faintly of fresh paint and pizza grease and hope. Maybe it was just finally understanding that I had everything I needed right here, and nothing they said or did could change that. Either way, I didn't hesitate. The past knocked, and for the first time, I didn't answer. I looked at Emily, who caught my eye and smiled, like she somehow knew without me having to explain. She tossed a stuffed animal into my lap and said, "We still have to pick a name. Dad-to-be." I grinned. We had better things to focus on. Looking back now, it's strange how something that once felt like the end of the world barely stings anymore. When my parents chose Melissa's housewarming party over my wedding, I thought it was the ultimate betrayal. I thought it was the day I lost my family. But the truth is, it wasn't the day I lost them. It was the day I stopped losing myself trying to earn love that was never freely given. If there's one thing this whole messy, heartbreaking, absolutely necessary experience taught me, it's this. Family isn't the people who share your blood. Family is the people who share your burdens. Family is who shows up when it's hard, not just when it's easy. Family is who celebrates your wins without resentment, who sits with you through losses without making it about themselves. Family is built with choices, not obligation. I spent years thinking if I just bent a little more, smiled a little harder, forgave a little faster, maybe someday they'd see me, appreciate me, love me the way they loved Melissa. But what I finally understand now is people show you who they are by what they choose. Every time. Melissa lied, manipulated, and twisted every good thing into a weapon. My parents chose to believe her, because believing her meant never having to confront their own failures. That's who they are. And me? I chose differently. I chose Emily. I chose quiet mornings and chaotic afternoons. I chose a dog who sheds all over the couch and a fixer-upper house filled with laughter instead of long, bitter silences. I chose a future built on honesty and love, not obligation and guilt. And soon, I'll be choosing a new life, a little one, who will grow up never knowing what it's like to have to earn a place at the table, who will know, deep down, that they are loved simply because they exist. That's the legacy we're building now, and it's more valuable than anything I ever lost. If you're reading this, and you're stuck in that awful limbo, wondering if you're a bad person for walking away from toxic family, please hear me. You are not wrong for choosing peace. You are not cruel for demanding respect. You are not broken because your family couldn't see your worth. You are allowed to outgrow the people who refuse to meet you where you are. You are allowed to protect your joy. And if no one else ever says it, I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. It's not easy. It's not neat. But it's worth it. Every damn time.